Hello everyone, Ace here, and today I've decided to have yet another look at some video game history, and in the process answer the question, what exactly made SEAL Team great? First released all the way back in 1993 exclusively for MS-DOS, and tasking the player with being a point man in a SEAL team during the Vietnam War. SEAL Team is these days an admittedly obscure game. It is, however, one that was also way ahead of its time, and is an absolute trailblazer in terms of video game design. But to understand why this is the case, let's talk about what made this game great. And the first thing that made SEAL Team great is that it is arguably the first tactical shooter ever created. Now, some have suggested that Airborne Ranger, as well as its sequel Special Forces, should hold that particular honor. However, both of those games are played from a top-down perspective. Whereas by contrast, SEAL Team from 1993 was played in a fully 3D environment, which itself is a key cornerstone of the tactical shooter genre. Now, given that this game was arguably the first of its kind, and also given how obscure it is today, you could be forgiven for thinking that outside of just creating the tactical shooter genre, that it may not have actually had that big of an impact overall. However, you would be very much wrong in that assessment. In fact, it's truly impressive just how many mechanics that are standard in tactical shooters today can be seen in SEAL Team as well. Features such as the number of enemies being somewhat randomized on a specific mission, or the presence of civilians that you have to worry about, or the ability to capture enemies by scaring them enough that they end up surrendering to you. And on that subject, the AI is quite impressive as well given the time that this game came out, because just like with the SWAT games, for example, the AI can choose to fight or choose to surrender or even choose to try to run away. I could also point out the light RPG mechanics, which have been another staple of the genre ever since, as well as light stealth mechanics as well, allowing you to lie in wait and let your enemies get closer to make that ambush that little bit more effective. You also have access to fire support in the form of helicopters, aircraft, and riverboats. The first and third options also being your means for extraction during these missions. On top of this, I also have to point out features that the game has that aren't unheard of within the genre, but are certainly less common, such as the fact that the damage model in the game is done well enough that it's possible for you to be unable to really use your legs if you get badly wounded enough, causing you to constantly go prone if you try standing up or crouch walking. On that subject, it's also possible that any wounded enemies you capture may need medical aid themselves, requiring your SEAL team to use first aid kits to stabilize them. I could keep going on about the game's mechanics and how they made this game an absolute trailblazer as far as the tactical shooter genre is concerned, but I believe it's also necessary to discuss something else that made the game great, that being just how impressive it was from a technical standpoint. Sure, you can tell that this game came out in the early 90s, however even then it's truly impressive just how much they were able to accomplish, given the hardware limitations of the era. Unsurprisingly, trying to depict the Vietnamese jungles means trying to depict lots and lots of vegetation on an open world map, and this is something that games from the early 2000s were known to struggle with, much less a game from the early 90s. But then you have, adding to that, the occasional birds, bats, and even insects flying around, and this game really does become something of a visual treat from the era, and really does make one wonder how on earth they got it running in the first place. But then the developers decided to take it an extra step further, by adding in some destructible terrain as a feature as well. It's possible, for example, to see gunfights become so intense that trees literally fall down from the sheer number of shots that have went through them, though even then you can still use them for cover. Basically what I'm saying is that SEAL Team is just as impressive from a technical standpoint as it is in terms of innovation in game design. But I do believe there is one additional ingredient that makes SEAL Team truly special, in particular if you're a history buff. And so let's move on to the third thing that made the game great, that being that this game was surprisingly interesting as a piece of edutainment. It's worth noting that all the missions within SEAL Team are based on actual historical missions that the SEALs really did in Vietnam. And you even have the ability to read up on some of these missions in-game and see how they played out in real life, courtesy of the UDT SEAL Museum that the game's developers partnered up with when they made SEAL Team. With that all said, this has been Ace, and I hope you'll agree when I say that SEAL Team from 1993 is great.